Hi, I'm Scott Doubleday-Stern. Today we're going to do a quick walkthrough of creating an Azure Active Directory domain services resource. That's going to give us the equivalent of a Domain Controller-lite in our Azure subscription in the cloud, connected to our Azure Active Directory tenant. The tenant is apart from our subscription, separate from it. It contains our users from things like Office 365 or synced from an on-premise Active Directory account or just created right there in Azure Active Directory. That can be shared across multiple subscriptions. And if you've created subscriptions that are linked to one another or using an account that's linked to an existing tenant, you'll sort of inherit that tenant to all of those subscriptions. If you create a new pay-as-you-go account all by itself, not connected to any other existing organization, you'll get a fresh, empty tenant with just your username in it. And you can add new users to that. That's what we're doing today, or what we have done today. We're basically following this tutorial from Microsoft, and we begin by taking a quick look at what that looks like when you're not part of some other existing tenant. Specifically on your main subscription page, the parent management group, there's nothing there. It means there isn't some other organization or tenant above yours that's filled with users already. This is Azure Active Directory for a self-employed account. That's the one where you just take an email address to portal.azure.com and sign up for an account. It's like, oh, you're self-employed. Great, thanks. You'll see your tenant ID there. And we're going to start. And then there in the users tab is where you go if you want to add a new user. For this, I created a test user to be the user that I actually used when I was when I was joining VMs to my new little Active Directory domain. And creating the user was easy. Go to users, add this, username, specify a password. We wind up changing that password shortly, but we'll get to that in a minute. And if you go search the top of Azure for Azure AD Domain Services, you land here. This is where we're going to create a managed service that's going to be our Domain Controller-lite. We're not going to be able to remote into that, but it's going to allow us to join servers to the domain and use domain user accounts to authenticate against them, which is nice because then you can just sign in one time and have your credentials work across all the VMs you're setting up in Azure. So we hit new, and this is the basics pane. We added a resource group here to hold that. We specify a DNS domain name. I think it caps us at 15 characters. I picked the standard SKU, which is $100 a month, give or take, at time of recording. And plenty of functionality for just this testing setup. On networking, we create a virtual network and a subnet for this to live on. It will create a resource that sits on the subnet, and that is we can't really get at that resource, but it does live there, and that's what we do on networking. We go down here to administration. You click the manage group membership tab. That takes you to a place where you can select which groups or which users you want to have be AADDC administrators. That's the group that says you're allowed to join VMs to the domain. So I added myself to that, and I added my new test user to that. The rest of this was boring in the sense that I just clicked right past it all. Synchronization will allow you to take just a subset of users from an Azure Active Directory and bring them in here as available users in the domain. But there were only two of us. So I kept everything. Two of us being myself and my new test user. That's what we just talked about. You get to the end of that and you hit, create. And then you sit for like 45 minutes while this spins. And you're like, oh, it's done. I can use it now. No. This then sits. This is the like landing page for your Azure AD Domain Services resource. And it'll sit here being provisioned for another like hour and a half. And then you're still not done. There's a little flag up top, one of these little banners there, the warning banners. You get a new one that says you need configuration stuff done. And you click that, and then it says, would you like to run a scan? And you say, yes, run the scan. And it says, do you want to fix this problem manually, or do you want us to do it? And you say, fix. And it'll update DNS settings. You need to do this before you start creating VMs, or you'll have to reboot the VMs before they can see the domain services. Okay. Ta-da! Now, after your domain services are created, you're going to need to change the password on that new cloud-based user that you created up front, if you did that the way I did, because you need to have the domain services existing to receive the hashed password from the password change of the cloud-based user so that you could then use it to join to the domain. I think you can log in without having changed the password, but as the user, but it will require that password change before it'll let you use that account to join VMs to the domain. And then wait half an hour because it'll be like locked out or not yet synced or something. And so I was sitting there banging on it, being like, why is it not joining? Lockouts. So at this point, you can go create some virtual machines, stick them in that virtual net, either in that subnet or better practice would be a different subnet. And then you can go into the remote into those servers and change the work group to join to a domain. You specify the domain name that you have from whatever the basics. That thing there, that's what goes in, the domain radio button on joining your computer to the domain and joining your VM to the domain. And that'll prompt you for the credentials of a AADDC administrator. You provide that and it says, congratulations, you joined. Restart. And then you restart the computer and you're on the domain. And then you can take that test user and use that set of credentials to connect like via RDP to one of these servers, which is mostly just fun to do and be like, oh, look, I have a domain. I can connect to it with domain users that don't exist except in my little Azure Active Directory. So once you've done that, you can spin up, say, 2 VMs next to each other and deploy my data entry app from my GitHub page, and then pull up 2 remote desktop sessions next to each other. The one in the back there is the server that has the app installed, and then the one in the front here is being able to find that app from a different server and connect to it and use it. And then you can RDP from the one server to the other using the credentials of the domain user that you've created. And then beyond that, you can do anything else you want to do with computers that are actually on the same domain together. So use Excel to connect to like a SQL server or something. You may have connectivity things to debug, but that's beyond the scope of this. I'm Scott Doubleday-Stern. Please like, subscribe for other data adjacent technical content. My GitHub page is there, and hope this was helpful. Have a great day.